Meet Smarty, the easiest to implement and most accurate address intelligence suite on the planet, offering you the #1 address verification service that securely processes billions of addresses daily. Easily integrate Smarty's reliable API to efficiently clean data, lower shipping costs, and ensure top-notch user experiences, all with legendary free support. See for yourself why people are simply bananas for Smarty.
Hello and welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend and I'm marketing operations here at Smarty. Today's webinar is about smart practices and legal insights for using address data. Our presenter today, we have John Marco Rossborough, Smarty's legal counsel with us, and we're very excited to hear what he's going to have to share with us today. So without further ado, John Marco.
Thanks. I am John Marco. I am legal counsel for Smarty. I've been here for 7 years. I'm a licensed attorney in Utah, and I do need to put a disclaimer in here that what I say in today's cast shouldn't be considered legal advice, but just regular advice, or maybe just a presentation to give you food for thought and an opportunity to ask questions, and then mostly emphasize that you should reach out to your local counsel and get to know them well so that you can navigate these uncharted waters.
It's just a webinar. This doesn't count as legal. This is not your legal review.
So, okay, well, we'll just jump in. Last year, I got to do this, and I'm thankful to be here again. Reluctantly thankful. Here, so I have 5 tips that quickly review from last year, and as a reminder, if you happen to have chimed in, we talked about mapping out your data and having an inventory and updating privacy policy. The other tip was to minimize your data and have minimize the retention of your data and have a policy. Meet with your data security team, your IT, and be transparent about incident responses and test those. Number 4 was to cover your assets in that, get cybersecurity and cyber insurance for your company, and then reach out again to an attorney, because ignorance is no defense. Ignorance of the law is no defense. Ignorance is a defense, but
not a good one.
Ignorance of the law is not typically a good defense. So
yeah, we did this webinar a year ago, and so I guess the question is, what has changed? But I guess a lot of the people that are here now probably weren't here last year. But at the same time, like, what's new?
Yeah, last year we kind of went briefly. All of this is kind of high overview, but we covered GDPR and CCPA, the California statutes for protecting personal information. And this year, just what's new is that more states are coming on board. In about 10 days, we have Texas and Florida and Oregon that are going to be enforceable. And then in October, Montana will also jump on board as officially having a consumer data protection legislation enacted. There's 18 other states coming on board. And so there's a lot to consume here, a lot to go over, and there's no way I can cover all that. But I hope to just briefly maybe use Texas as an example compared to California in this webinar.
All right, let's, so aren't they all pretty much the same?
Yeah, they are, because
like, I'm looking at this map on this last slide. This map talks about dedicated privacy laws that are signed, dedicated privacy laws that are introduced. Like, we're getting there.
We're getting there,
but they all say privacy laws. So aren't they all essentially the same?
Yes, they're all attempting to accomplish the same thing: to protect consumer rights and protect their data, right? And we all have that need. We all know how important it is, and hopefully we haven't experienced any major There's, breaches that we can talk of, but Smarty hasn't, but I can say that. But each state is different as to the approach and what the definitions are all over the place and what's considered a consumer. Who do these law apply to? Are there exemptions? And what rights are we going to afford consumers? And so some are really strict and some are a little more lenient as to giving you time to cure mistakes that you may make along the way. So really the devil's in the detail as to each individual state and understanding and knowing how to navigate through all the requirements.
Sure. So it's very state by state, and this is you mentioned California. I mean, California is up on the screen. They enacted a bunch in 2020.
Yep.
Not a bunch, a law that covers a lot of different things.
Yeah. So that's the CCPA, but which has been amended now to CPRA, California. What is it? Protection.
Pottery rollout applications.
Yeah. CPRA is an amendment to the CCPA, and it basically better defines. California has been leading us, right? And so they've had case law and they've better defined what is a consumer or who does this law apply to, the scope, the definition of data, private or personal data, and what's considered sensitive and what's not. And these other states are oftentimes will piggyback and copy California, or Virginia is a leader as well. Connecticut has been, and Colorado and Utah were one of the early states to be on board, right? So these three other states, Texas follows more Virginia law.
Okay.
And tends to be a little less stringent in some of the requirements, but we don't have one law to govern them all. Last year, I think I talked about something coming along the way. This year, I found out that there was a new federal legislation that has been proposed back just in April, not too long ago. That's the American Privacy Rights Act. Opera, I guess. And this bill is a little more friendly to small businesses. They're seems to be going after big data holders. And they've narrowed down what is considered sensitive data as opposed to just regular personal data.
So what does laws of first impression mean, and what is the difference between that and then the federal act that's in the works?
So the federal act, if it's ever enacted and passed, then that is intended to supplement the state's laws.
Okay.
Not necessarily supersede. Well, usually federal law supersedes them, but I don't think it's drafted in such a way that it's going to cover everything.
Okay.
So I think state law will still be relevant, and it is still going to be hodgepodge depending on where you are doing business. But the intent is not necessarily to replace each state. Inevitably, the states will conform to, and we have a desire to all conform into one. And so that's something to look forward to, but it doesn't exist yet. Europe's ahead of us leaps and bounds because they have their GDPR. And
you said that out loud? You're going to say out loud that Europe's ahead of us?
No offense against any Europeans out there. I happen to be European.
Oh,
all right.
That's right.
Right. I was born in Italy. All right. So that's that. I mean, so there's still federal laws that govern certain industries. We didn't talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But, if you're a financial industry, you're going to be under GLBA. If you're a health industry, you're going to be under HIPAA laws, right? Or educational institutions are going to be under FERPA and such. So state law will still apply, but hopefully we'll have a little more consolidation as to definition would be nice.
So, in the
Laws
slides,
of
you've
first.
given me some of the.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, let's go over those
Would
laws.
ask laws of first impression
I
is
did.
simply just that. Each state, some states are farther along in this area, right? California has case law. Delaware, that hasn't been enacted yet, even though that's a commonplace to do business litigation, right? But they're not necessarily better than California. California's farther down the road with more experience. So, first impression, meaning that if you were to litigate certain areas of these laws, and you show up in the state of Texas in 10 days, you might be the first case,
Sure.
And so there's not a lot to go on, and
No
the
precedent.
judge, no precedent. Exactly. Way to speak legalese.
It's like you texted me a word and said it's precedent. It's called precedent.
Not president. No. Yeah.
So, okay. So then you were talking about the
Okay.
state privacy laws.
Who's affected? Yep. Yeah. So again, each state you'll have to. I put up a slide. I think it was the second one, like as far as tracking state by state. And there's websites out there if you want, a resource. I'm not endorsing Termly, but I use that one. And what I like about that map, I can click on one of those states. I can it has a link to the actual statute that I can
That's
read.
this one. So that's at this site, the termly.io.
And again, I've not ever used this before, but it was just one that I pulled up, and it got me to the statute, to the state government sites. And as I was able to kind of review some of the conditions and regulations that are going to come into effect. So does that answer your question? And then we went to state privacy laws, who's affected? Well, this is where the details, each state will have slightly different entities affected by their laws, and they'll give exemptions. For example, we could use Texas as an example. Can I do that?
Sure. I'll allow it.
It's allowed. In Texas, they're looking for this law will apply to a controller, that, in other words, a business that conducts business or produces a product or service for Texas residents that deals with personal data, that processes or sells that personal data. And they give exemptions to small businesses if they're not selling sensitive personal information.
Oh, so there's like different tiers of personal information.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so they do, and then how they define a small business is defined by the SBA, and you can look up that, but not all states do that. California certainly doesn't do that. They want you to analyze and see things like on your slide. They want to know how much control, how much sales you have that are derived from selling. If it's more than 50%, you qualify or for being governed under the law. You're governed under California. Different entities and industries are exempt if there already exist laws. And then the gross revenue in California, the CCPA may not apply to your business if you're not making at least $25 million in gross revenue.
Okay. And to be clear, also, if my company is in Idaho, I still should care about the laws in Texas if I've got customers in Texas.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. We're dealing with consumers' data, and the laws that apply is where it's not your own state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're only doing business in Idaho, then yeah, definitely get familiar and know Idaho law. But the moment you go into interstate commerce, you're
in trouble.
Well, you may be, and each state may apply, but you may need to do an analysis.
Sure.
Have we generated enough revenue to be in that state, to be governed by that law. And maybe you haven't done $25 million, or I don't know what the rules are for Idaho, but if $25 million, or if Texas and such, Texas, I'm not sure that they really go by define a small business as the number of so much your revenue as they do about the size, like number of employees, and each industry will dictate. The SBA is what they're relying on, is defining what's small business. They may clarify that later, but again, first impression, this is how they wrote it, and then down the line they may end up amending it. But Texas does give exemptions for small businesses, for government entities and state agencies, for financial institutions. Most every state, I've noticed, gives an exemption to nonprofit organizations. Or if you're a nonprofit, hey, you're lucky to not be under these laws, I guess, or lucky. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but you might not be held to these standards if you're dealing with personal information of your consumers. But you're for sure governed under your own state laws or other laws. There's also the Institution of Higher Education, FERPA will govern those. And so that's exempt in Texas. Other differences in the states is exactly what rights do you have in those states as a consumer. If you want to protect, you go to a website, or you want to protect your personal data, you have a right to, and I don't know is that a slide? Do I mention rights?
You've got, right here. So the state privacy laws. So the previous one right here kind of talks about the impact on the companies. But then this slide you put together that talks about the right of the consumers with these state privacy laws.
Right. So that's what these laws are really intended for. And as a consumer, you want to know that when you give your information to purchase something, that they're not going to take that and do nefarious things or sell it to someone else. And inevitably, everyone wants your email so that they can start spamming you with a bunch of I don't know, different ads and things. So you want to have some control. And so a lot of these states give you a right to know how it's being collected, what's being done with it, a right to access that information. Hey, I don't know, Best Buy, you have my address wrong, or you have my name spelled. My name's John Marco, and let me tell you, there's different spellings that I get, right? So if I want that corrected, I have a right to call them up and have them go in their system and correct it.
Sure.
And that's, a right to delete is a little controversial because no one wants to delete completely their records, especially if you've already done business with them. They may have legal right to deny that, or at least say, well, your data won't be used in production. We won't, email you or notify you or reach out to you, but you'll still historically for maybe it's litigation may keep that data in order statute of limitation to meet a statute of limitation.
So I'm gonna try to push us forward a little bit to talk about the address bits in particular. So we talked about the different levels of personal information. There's some that is way more personal, some that's sensitive personal, and some that's genetic, biometric data. I'm sure that applies way more to hospitals than it does to like telecom.
Right.
But where in these does address data land?
Well, that's the thing. It is personal data. So if you look under the blue guy, there's address is considered personal data, and the personal data is basically defined. I want to find the actual definition, but maybe I don't have it. Any information that is linked reasonably linked to an identifiable individual. And each state slightly will vary in the way that they define that. But whether it's sensitive or not, that's debatable. Certainly, like the yellow guy, if you look on the screen, race, ethnicity, sexual preference, and philosophical beliefs, religion, and those kind of things, those are considered by many of the states or most of the states, those are
Sensitive data.
sensitive, right? Having an address is not so sensitive in that you're going to move, that address doesn't go with you.
Sure. So I'll
Right,
pull up this
so-
next one. So why isn't my address considered sensitive?
Well, that's one reason is that you really can't take it with you. So it does identify you. It's still I can say, Andrew of 22nd Street or whatever, and have an address attached to you, and you might be in government records, and that's your name's on there, and it's identifiable. But when you move, right, and someone else, Joe Schmo, lives there now, doesn't really identify
Sure.
you anymore. So that's one reason. Also, a lot of the states have carved out that personal information doesn't really apply to publicly available information. So again, if government records or your county recorder's office has that information, that's considered publicly available and kind of exempt from being governed or being considered sensitive.
Mhm.
And you may still want to protect it because California is a little stricter about what they consider publicly available, and other states not as strict. But and then the definition down here below in that screen, it just says it's made available through federal, state, or municipal government, and the controller has a reasonable basis to believe that the consumer has lawfully made that information public. So it's assumed that if you're going to receive mail, that you've opened yourself up to that address, and anyone can send you mail if they happen to have that address. But it's hard to control that. It's hard to say, okay, I want my address to disappear, right?
So really it's not necessarily personally PII unless it's attached to something else and current.
Right, right. So having a name associated and being able to connect it to an individual really may trigger, being governed under these privacy laws. And so you need to, this is kind of the benefit that Smarty has, is when we process data, when we process your addresses, we're not asking you to send the names, and there's no field for you to really enter your names.
Right.
So, and if it comes in, we'll screen it out. But
so another question has come up that there is publicly available information, including addresses. I mean, you can
back in the scour Facebook or something, and someone says, "Come to my party," and puts their address.
Sure, but I can also go to my city and say I want to know address information, and they can give it to you, and you can find data. I mean, there's addresses, census data, even by itself. There's publicly accessible information, and addresses are one of those. So the differentiation between what is PII as an addresses being a PII. When should I be worried? I guess that's really the question. At what point do I go, oh my gosh, I have an address database. Should I even have this address database? It's publicly accessible information.
Right. So consider where you got that information, right? How did you, were these customers that gave, consented to you having it, or did you purchase them on the dark web, or did you
always the dark?
Sorry, no, I don't know. I don't even know what a dark web is. But no, but if you look at the slide, it'll say too that if your source was a media source or sourced from other places, California is really strict. They limit it to just governmental records. And then they kind of expanded. There was CPRA, I guess, but Virginia was always a little looser. They'll consider data that you obtain through media sources and things like that. Well, it's a strict. Looks like Colorado's pretty strict, right? They don't allow second party sourced information to be made available, or internet sourced information.
And to be clear, these are just numbered because those were probably links or something. There's references to other things. It's not that Connecticut
Yeah,
has 16 laws on data subject source. They're just being
no. So my information came from was that the
National Law
National Law
Review.
Review, and this refers to, I'm sure if you go to this site, it'll refer to some explanation as to
Sure.
how they limit it, right? It's just a chart, but just the whole concept being that you need to know and take care of the source where you get and have a legal basis to have that information, right? As a personal consumer, as just you, Andrew, you're not a business dealing with this personal information. You're not selling that data. You're just using it to reach out. It's not going to affect you. These laws won't affect you, but this is mostly business,
Sure.
large businesses.
So then what about Smarty? This is my next big question. So Smarty, we have addresses.
Yeah.
We
Our
have loads of
sources-
information. So here's a question.
Yeah.
What about Smarty? And
Our
we have a general
sources-
rule. Don't send us names and we'll all get along
Right.
dandy. But
Right. Our source is the USPS. Like we're a licensee of the USPS. Every year we renew that license. We have their database and we use that as authoritative as far as the standard. And so when you send us your dirty address, so to speak, and what I mean by dirty, there's just how many different ways can you spell boulevard?
right, non-standardized. You could say
Non-standardized.
dirty,
Can I
but
say
we're
that?
looking for
I don't know,
non-standardized.
dirty is not the right word. Right. But yeah, how many ways can you spell a certain name, MacArthur Street or whatever? And so they'll come to us and then we standardize it and bring it back based on what we consider authoritative as USPS. As good as their data is, ours, and then we tout to be a little better because we try to
We have magic
yeah,
on top
magic.
of that. Right.
Magic. That's
what you're paying for. Smarty magic.
Yep.
There's a question that came in. There's not a state where a person cannot get all voters' database on a thumb drive or equivalent. They're prohibited to be used for purposes other than contacting voters as voters. But this is heavily violated. Why do you think there have been no prosecutions? And maybe the question is something we just say, that's not our law.
Well, and here's an interesting point, and some states allow an individual to sue a company that's violating this directly.
Sure.
So California, plaintiff lawyer heaven, so let's go and get an attorney and let's sue them. Texas, no, you gotta show that you've been damaged. You got to go to attorney general, the state attorney general, and then he's got to say it's a big enough case that he wants to take it on and teach that company a lesson. And just know that Texas, unlike California, they give you 30 days right to cure. And so if you happen to be a consumer and you catch a company abusing it, or violating what they say they're going to use your data for, then you got to have a convincing case for the attorney general to want to take that. The thumb drive or the voting registration information, that's interesting. I mean, I know it's violated. I mean, it's violated recently in a lot of ways. Artificial intelligence, robo phone calls,
Sure.
going out, mimicking the voice of this is Joe Biden or whatever. I shouldn't
Sure.
political, but
Well, that was a really bad impression also.
I can do one, but I may offend half our audience. I don't know. But
it's being used incorrectly. Beyond what they said they were going to use.
So you want to look at the state law. You want to maybe, just look at the statute or get an attorney if you're affected by that. And you're a consumer and you want to exercise your rights and you want to correct things, you have a right to reach out and try to get that corrected. But again, state agencies, I don't know who supplies voter registration. Isn't that a governmental source? And they're exempt from being governed under these privacy laws.
Sure.
And so good luck exercising some of your rights, but I'm sure they want their data to be complete and accurate. And so you probably still have a right to ask them to cleanse it or correct it. But I don't know if I've
Sure. I guess
answered
the
that.
answer is we don't know.
I
It
don't
should
know.
be.
Somebody
It should
might
be
know.
chased down.
Yeah.
We don't know why it isn't. So before we close, we're already a little bit over time
Oh.
here. What are the top strategies for 2024?
So, and I didn't get into it very much, but again, get familiar with data privacy laws. Get a SOC 2 audit or ISO 27001
001.
audit. Those are for international people that deal with international data, but addresses and things like that. But get an audit because they'll analyze all the controls that you should have in place. If you're wondering, am I doing enough for security? And our policies in place that we have confidentiality? How much at risk am I? And integrity, whether I'm following what I say I'm going to follow. Am I transparent enough on what I'm doing with my data? Trust but verify your vendors and your subcontractors. Often that's done via the DPAs. And we're constantly reviewing DPAs because we're considered a processor and our clients are controllers and they want to make sure that they're covered. They're liable if anything goes wrong. So we reassure them that we have the security in place and we treat their information with kid gloves. So, yeah, and then adopt an attorney again. Can't tell you how valuable that could, not me.
It's super valuable for attorneys, I'll say.
If I was a specialist, I'd pitch this. I'm not a specialist in this field, but just anything I can share, I'm happy to share. But there's resources out there that all they do is scour and learn privacy laws and be able to answer all your questions.
All right. So I would get a slap on the wrist if I didn't tell you guys to go try Smarty. If you haven't already, you guys should go to smarty.com and try it out, see what kind of data you get from an address. Because even each address, we didn't get into this in this session, but every address technically has loads of information about the location, where it's at. You've got its
lat longs.
Yeah, lat long. You've got its voter precinct kind of things. You've got the delivery route. There's like a lot of information you get with every address. So that kind of can help open your eyes as to why addresses are included as personal information.
But you won't find names.
No names.
So
there
just
are
attributes
of
a physical location, right? And a physical geolocation, and not necessarily attributes of anyone associated with that. But if they have a swimming pool, I'm going to assume that they're rich. Market.
Or they're okay with debt. But yes, that's great. So we're out of time. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Hopefully we answered all of the questions that you were looking for. If you do have more questions specific to address data, anywhere on smarty.com, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little chat bubble, and that goes directly to the people that are sitting directly above me here in our building. They'll be able to answer your question or help you find the person that can answer your question. So by all means, use that little chat bubble to chat into our support team that can help you with this. Thank you, John Marco, for your time.
Yeah, thanks.
Every year, this is very, very popular and a little bit scary, and you help us get less scared.
You're less scared now?
Well,
okay, well,
ignorance was bliss.
Fair enough.
But not
Fair
defensible. Enough. So like
not
you said, that's good.
Exactly.
Thanks, everybody. We hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.